Well, Kait, welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I can't wait.
Hey, it's an honor. And Kait, I want to paint a picture for this context today with some of your story. Today, we're talking about rejection in relationships. What happened to you that motivated this message?
Okay, so man, I feel like everybody's stories have some sort of rejection in them, and it's kind of funny that I wrote a book on rejection because I feel like it's the one topic people hear and they're like, what? No, I don't want to talk about or think about rejection. But what happened in my story, is that I realized that the past, the things I've been through, so much of my story had to do with a plethora of different rejections in my life. And in fact, what's so funny is how I started what I do now, which is Heart of Dating. It all started in the wake of a heartbreak, which is one of the rejections I talk about in the book. And so that rejection, that heartbreak led me into a deeper processing of who I was, sorting through the lies I believed about myself. And I just had recognized up to that point in my life, literally, that rejection was a part of what made me who I was today. And I don't want to even say that as like a line, but it really was this profound moment of realizing, man, like so many of the rejections in my past have helped me to learn more about myself, to help me to press deeper into the heart of God, to help me know what I'm looking for in life, to help me face some of the things that maybe I didn't want to face. And it's actually redirected me to other paths. Like I think, and I'm going to say this on air to you, I don't think if this heartbreak that happened to me 3.5 years ago, I don't think if that had happened, that I would have ever started Heart of Dating, to be honest, which is my main thing that I do now. And then, of course, if I hadn't started Heart of Dating, I probably would have never written this book, So it's wild to me to think about the fact that a big rejection in my life, and we're talking this one about a heart rejection, a relational rejection, a heartbreak to a man I thought I was going to marry. I really thought I was going to marry him. That heartbreak led me into starting what God has put on my heart as my mission, what I feel is my calling, which is to speak into the lives of dating Christian singles, men and women. And so it's really amazing that in looking at my journey, there's lots of different rejections that have been really hard. And in my book, I talk about ones that I've never spoken about publicly, honestly, that I just wrote down on paper for the first time. But to look through all of those and realize, man, as we step back, as God continues to weave our stories, as he does so beautifully, like he really does redirect us to something that we never would have thought possible. And as I've stepped back and looked at my life, like there is such a profound hope in that. That doesn't dismiss the pain and the weight of the different things I experienced through all those rejections. But I don't know, today is like, that's what I want to share with people. Like these rejections of my past that still happen to this day, Chris. We'll get into that because I was recently rejected as well. But it's led me to a place of realizing that God's hand of protection really is over me through every single one of those, and doesn't make them all that much easier. They're still going to happen, but they don't have to take me down the same way they did in the past, because I know now that no matter what, they're going to bring me to somewhere that I never thought possible. So, yeah.
What's the deeper story then? What's the deeper motivation? Because what I hear you saying is that through the impetus of rejection, it uncovered this passion to help people. Now, you're helping people through Heart of Dating.
Yeah.
And you also wrote this book called Thank You for Rejecting Me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the deeper heart, Kait. What is the motivation? In other words, when you wake up every day, you want to see people do what because they should know what? And then we'll dive deeper.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love that. You are a great question asker, okay? So that's awesome. I'm like, whoo, let's go there. So the deeper motivation, I don't want people to feel alone, first of all. I think so much of my journey, I talk a lot in the book about just feeling shame and rejecting myself and being really hard on myself and feeling like what's wrong with me because so many of these things have happened to me. And so the first and foremost priority that I have for people is to really realize they are not alone through anything they're going through, that they may be in an abusive relationship. Well, 1 in 3 people are in an abusive relationship, which is a heartbreaking statistic. And vulnerability is really at the heart and core of my message. And there has been for years, I'll tell you this, Chris, 5 years ago, I think somewhere in the 5 years mark, I had a friend speak over me. They were like, Kait, I think that God wants to use your stories of abuse and rejection and heartbreak and dating to help people. And I remember in that moment looking at her and being like, heck no, there is no way that I will ever share these things publicly, because my biggest fear was, what will people think if they knew those things were a part of my story? What will people think if they knew I was in an abusive relationship? What will people think if they knew that I have had a lot of dating, I've made a lot of dating mistakes, What would they think if they knew how I showed up in some of those relationships? Or that I continually have my heart broken? What would they think if they knew I didn't have it all together behind the scenes? And I pushed against that for years. And so it's taken a lot of God working on my heart to say, hey, no, those things, those rejections, the things that you think marred your story are actually the things that make your story. They're the things that make you who you are. And so I want others to get rid of, like, be able to bring the shame and the lies they believe about themselves to the light, and to say, hey, these lies of rejection, these lies of the trauma from my past, they don't have to have a hold over me anymore. They're not true, but we have more power within us than we think. Yeah. And I think that we often sit and like I did for many years, like those things define me. And I'm like, if only I could put all of them and stuff them into closets and perfect the perfect image I want people to think, then I'll feel good. But all that stuff needs to stay in the closet. Don't come out. Don't anyone go in there. Like that was my whole thought process. So for me, what I want people to feel when they're reading this book, when they wake up in the morning, is like, I am loved just as I am. Mm-hmm. I am accepted just as I am. I do not have to perform to convince anybody of that. My identity does not come from if this person wants me, loves me, accepts me, chooses me. Because what is rejection? It's the opposite of all those things. Mm-hmm. It can feel that way, right? Mm-hmm. So I want people to feel like they are wholly accepted, wholly loved, because God created them that way. And we have to not only accept that identity, that's an inherent identity, but then come to believe it and know it to be true about ourselves. And when we can wake up every day saying that to ourselves, not only saying it, believing it, to like walking it out, which takes a journey. Like there is so much of a release, and like someone rejects us that day, someone looks at us the wrong way. Oh, okay. Maybe something's going on in their life, like maybe it doesn't all have to do with me, and there's something being wrong with me, Chris. So I've just found so much freedom in that personally. It's not a perfect journey I walk out, but that's my hope for people, is to feel that way when they wake up every day.
Kait, I'd love to push the button just a little bit, and to the extent you're comfortable sharing, because we all experience relationship heartache. We've all been through breakup. But I sense that there's something deeper that really went down to the level of your personal identity that shaped and uncovered this deep sense of why and purpose in your life. I mean, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, Kait, what happened inside a relationship? Maybe give us an example.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to think of, there's just so many situations. I will tell you this. I recently also went through a breakup. And so I like to bring that up right now, because I just want people to know that even though I wrote this book, like I'm still going through it. And I wouldn't sit here today to say, like, I have it all figured out, to the fact that rejection hits me and I don't even feel it. I'm not invincible. We're not created to be robots. And so, but what I will tell you, and the biggest struggle I've had, I actually write about this in chapter 2, is just, to me, I think that anybody in the world can reject me, but the worst part of rejection is when I self-reject first, because we reject ourselves before other people even have the chance to. And I weave that throughout the book in different ways. And I bring it up even in the chapter of abuse, which is one of the worst relational situations that's happened to me in my life. But I do believe, like, when we don't accept the core of who we are, when we reject things about ourselves and we cover up the things of our past with shame, the things I'm talking about that are in the closet, that we don't want to bring out to the light because we're afraid what people think, we're berating ourselves. We are talking badly about ourselves. We're trying to cover things up because we're so afraid of man. And honestly, that was me for so many years. My identity has been as a performer, as a workaholic, as a person who has perfected a specific image, like, hey, look at me with my hair done and my cool outfits and like my together life and I have my great career. But meanwhile, like, in different seasons of my life, I could be doing all that. And then I was in an abusive relationship and behind closed doors, working at a high powered career, I was up till 4 a.m. screaming with this boyfriend and being horrifically abused by him mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually. And
Oh,
it's like, and to be honest, like after that relationship specifically, I basically labeled in myself, but wouldn't say it outside externally, but internally, I hated myself.
mhm.
I was like, you deserved that treatment and you got yourself there and you were naive and you were stupid. And these are the things I said to myself, And so part of like what's going on here is like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't even let those things never cross my mind again. I will bring it back to the relationship I just went through. And one of the first things that I had to do, I remember a week after that breakup, I was in Mexico and trying to process, trying to heal. And I remember starting to freak out because all of a sudden those lies of it's you, Kate. What does this guy think about you? What are people going to think about you? You're a failure yet again. What does he really think about you? You didn't show up perfectly in that relationship. What is he going to say about you? You should have acted this way. You should have done this better. Like the shoulding of myself. I talk about the shoulding, the you should have, you could have been like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, I found myself on the beach weeping and realizing, man, okay, wait, do I have to live under these I should have, I could have identities? Like, do I have to live under these lies that if I follow that path will just make me hate myself, will
Mm.
just make me shame myself, will not actually bring me into wholeness and healing, but will leave me stuck in the heartache, in the shame, in the weight of the past. It will not move me forward. It will like leave me attached to this person who probably wasn't even the best for me.
Mm.
And
Quick
so,
plug. Yeah, go ahead.
yes,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, go
No, I was
ahead.
just gonna say a quick plug for your podcast, The Heart of Dating. It's
Yeah.
so good. You do a great job with it. But Kate, I heard you say, and perhaps just to follow up on what you just shared, and thank you for sharing that vulnerably.
Mm.
I heard you say that you're in a season of healing right now,
Yeah.
and so I'd love to know kind of what's transpiring on the inside, and how does that shape your view on relationships going forward, and then even coaching people through the same issues. Here's what I'm getting at.
Mm.
We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are.
Yeah.
And
True.
so you've got this tandem healing yourself happening
Mm.
by the power of the Holy Spirit working in you to say, hey, Kate, I've called you as this, and within you
Mm.
is an identity that is true. You are not your past. You're who
Mm.
I say you are. Now, Kate, while you're in a season of healing, what's happening on the inside so that you're coaching people to a place of health themselves? Does that make sense? Like you're not
Mm.
coaching people from a position of deficiency, but instead, as you just shared, wholeness. I'd love to know.
Mm. Yeah. So you want to know what the journey has been for me in that as of late? Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I honestly, it's been what I have been talking to with my therapist a lot. And I just want to put a plug here, everybody, that I don't believe that any leader out there should pretend that we have it all together and that we don't also need our own mentorship, our own
That's
counseling,
right.
our own wise voices speaking to us. I love getting to speak to other people and to help and come alongside other people, but it's not without the fact that I need that too. Like, and in fact, sometimes the advice I dish others, as cliche as it is, I need dish back to me. Okay. And so in this season, what that's looked like for me is honestly, a lot of recognizing my own vices, my own numbing mechanisms, not falling back into them. And what I talk about is literally going into feeling the pain, feeling the pain to healing the pain. And I've had to dive straight into what it looks like to just sit in grief. And what that looked like for me specifically in this breakup was he broke up with me. This man broke up with me a few days before we were going on a trip to meet both of our families. And in retrospect, like, I know it's like, whoo, let's pause for the
Oh,
weight
so
of like,
this was getting serious then.
this was a serious
Wow.
relationship, very
Yeah.
serious. Talking about engagement, it was serious.
Yeah.
And so it was shocking. I did not see the breakup coming. We were going to see the families. In retrospect, super grateful we didn't, because man, how hard would it have been, Chris, if I had gone on these trips, connected more with his family, connected more with my family, and then we come back with him still having doubts and questions, being like, wait, I still have these doubts and questions and I want to break up. Like I would have been like, but I just let you into like the intimacy of like my family life, which is hard for me. Whew. So in retrospect, as painful as that is, the 3 days before, wow, I'm grateful for that too. Again, I feel God's protection in that. I don't say that in like just a Christianese way. Like I'm grateful I
Totally.
didn't bring him into my family if we were going to break up. But I used that time that I had off of work instead to say, I'm going on my own trip and I'm going straight into this process of diving into the feels. And, people who had been following me on Instagram would know that I got off Instagram for a while. I went black or went dark. I just got off and I pressed into the healing. I got rid of my distractions. I let myself feel all the feels. I did not have a schedule for myself. I went to Mexico solo and literally it was just like, how do I feel everything? Feel anything I want to feel and dive straight into it. Journal my brains out, cry. I would wake up every morning on my hands and knees before God, just weeping because that guttural pain of losing somebody was so real. And I'd been there before, but it still doesn't make you invincible to feeling what a weight and what a loss of like dreams, a shattering of a hope of a life that I pictured with this person, And so going through journaling, feeling the feels, and then reckoning with some of the lies that still were coming up for me, like, hey, lies of you're going to be too much for somebody. You're never going to, no one's ever, once they like you at first, Kate, but once they get to know the layers of the intricacies of your heart, some of your still brokenness, they run and nobody's ever going to like that. They just like what they see on paper. That's been the lie that I believe for so long of like, oh, again, that perfectly crafted image that I can create. But when they get to know me, my lie is that they don't like what they see. And so facing that lie head on through journaling, through prayer, through bringing that to God, through literally having to ask God once again, God, remind me of how you see me, remind me of what it is that you've gifted me, remind me of the uniqueness of my identity, writing all of that out. I want to emphasize that is why this season of rejection is it becomes a thing that you can more quickly go to these tools, but it doesn't mean that you don't need these tools ever again, right? And so bringing it to the modern day, a few months later, I think the lesson I've been learning is that I feel so thankful and so joyous while still experiencing grief. And I think the biggest lesson for me in this is like, hey, joy and grief can coexist. I love the movie Inside Out. Have you seen this movie? It's a Disney
really
movie.
Important. It's a really important film. Yeah.
Important movie.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of that is the main character's joy and sadness. And like this lesson you see through the movie that no one has seen. It's about like the developing emotions in a young adult. And there's 5 main emotions they show and their experience and the personality. But the 2 main emotions, joy and sadness. And what reveals Joy's trying to like kill all of these moments of sadness. Like we don't need sadness in our lives. Just be joyful. And what the message is that I receive at the end, I'm always crying, is like, wait, a lot of the moments of joy, of deep joy, were preceded by sadness. That there is so much sadness that also leads us to be able to experience the depths of great joy. And so, man, that's just where I'm at today.
Okay. Okay, thanks for sharing that. In fact, I just want to take a moment before we move on. It's Valentine's week, and I know there are a lot of people celebrating and a lot of people who are like, man, this sucks right now.
Yes.
And let's be honest, it could be a really hard season for many. And guys, I just want to take a moment to remind you, number one, your identity is not who you have. It's who you are in Christ. And I'm not meaning that to
Yes.
be a platitude. But what I want to say, and Kate, if you would, speak to people watching us, listening to us, about
Mm,
the importance of grief. You shared a bit of it, but
mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't want to move on too quickly without empowering people to know that if they've been through heartache, heartbreak,
Mhm.
grief is not only healthy, it's necessary. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I just, man, I feel the weight of that right now, Chris. Like the weight of it being
Mm-hmm.
Valentine's Day, of seeing all the couples coming out of the holiday season. And then,
Yeah.
it's like Christmas. They see all of it at Christmas. People have just experienced the weight of that. And then you go into Valentine's Day and it's another slap in the face. It's like, and like, I get it. Y'all just want to say, like, I have rarely had a date for Valentine's Day. I've also rarely had a boyfriend over Christmas. Okay. So I'm just making it clear, like, I get the weight of that. And the grief is so important. And there's nothing wrong with us when we're experiencing grief. I think that there is like some sort of stigma that we put on grief, like you should be done with it by now. You shouldn't feel that
Yes.
anymore.
Right.
Like you, especially as Christians, like we get uncomfortable sharing with people, Chris. Like if someone asks me, how are you doing? And my answer is, I'm struggling right now. I'm
Yeah.
actually grieving some
Yeah.
things still. I'm having a hard time. I'm questioning God. If we're real about that, then somebody's looking at us like it's like a deer in headlights. They're like, what? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
they didn't expect us to be really real and admit that, like, hey, maybe things aren't okay. Because what I feel like as Christians, we feel like we have to say at the end of those statements is, but God's good. Everything will be fine. I'm good. And we like have to tie the sentence with a Christianese silver bow of like, but I'm going to be fine. And like, yeah, maybe you will be fine, but it's okay right now if you're not fine. And it's okay
Right.
right now
Right.
if you're processing things. And it's okay right now that you had a bad day. It's okay right now that you saw something of your ex on Instagram and you're sad about it. It's okay right now that you're
Mm-hmm.
remembering some things from last year and where you were at last year and you feel sad that you went through a breakup or you feel sad that your dating life hasn't changed. Like that's okay. And you're allowed to take that moment. When we don't take those moments to grieve, to process, the body keeps the score and it lives within our body. And I didn't realize that because I was the queen of stuffing and compartmentalizing and just like pretending like I, have it together, right?
Yeah.
But it lives within our bodies. It can actually cause physical ailments within our
That's
bodies when we
exactly right.
don't allow the emotions to move through. So, what that's looked like for me, y'all, okay, just getting real practical here. If you are feeling that right now, some practical things. This is what I like to do. Cry, first of all, super therapeutic to just cry and let those toxins out. Great. I set a limit for myself. I'm not going to cry all day long. Okay. Cause then we go into a downward spiral. So we just cry with a limit of like letting it get out of the body, but not living in it to the point of I'm getting depressed. Right. But then other things like if you feel anger, angst, I feel a lot of angst. It's like that, like anxiety plus anger. And for me, I have to get that out of my body. I have to scream, yell,
Wow.
move my body, like get the angst out of there. Because if I don't, I'll project that on somebody else. For sure. And that's coming from grief, just like the angst of like, oh, why did this have to happen? Like, I'm so upset. I'm so angry. I'm angry at God. I'm angry at that guy. I'm angry at my situation. I'm angry at 2020. I'm angry at COVID, whatever it is, and just getting that out of your body, you guys. Breathing,
Mm-hmm.
man,
Mm-hmm.
breath work. I don't know if anyone else feels this, but I'm like a breath holder, which means when I'm overwhelmed, I stop breathing. I'll be like, and then what happens is I get stomach aches and it's like my stomach starts really hurting by the mid afternoon. And I realize if I just take deep breaths,
That's
it
right.
can honestly do so much. It's oxygen. We need oxygen, right? And so well, those are just some practical things to allow yourself to move emotions through your body. But there's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling and experiencing grief. And I just want to give you permission to not allow anybody to make you feel that way. Don't let anybody say to you, like, hey, you should be over this by now. That's just
So good.
terrible. Um, and I just want to be like, I'm sorry if people have said that to you. There is, of course, like, yeah, we should be move forward and not stay stuck. And we need people in our lives to help us to not get stuck for
Hmm.
sure. But
Hmm.
like, if you're having a day or a season where you're feeling down, like, that's okay. Allow yourself the space for that.
That's really good. Have you read The Body Keeps Score?
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a great book.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm constantly going back and referencing it because it's been a while since I've read. It's a long one, it's
It's
thick.
solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, you wrote, just about every time I thought I belonged or believed I was chosen or felt certain I could do something or was convinced I had found my person, rejection came like a toxic ex-boyfriend with a mission to reinforce every terrible and crippling thought I've ever had. Kate, unpack that.
Yeah. I feel like when rejection feels that way. It's like this friend, unwanted friend. And it's like, not you again. Dang it. Like, I just recovered from you. Where are you? Stop following me. Stop stalking me. Get out of my life. you know? And we so want to avoid it. The reality is we cannot avoid rejection. It will happen to us all the time. Big ways, small ways, little way. Like the littlest way of like you see someone at the gym, they
Hmm.
look at you the wrong way and you're like, what are they thinking about me? Did I do something to them? It literally could have nothing to do with you, friend. But we are feeling like they rejected us just by the way they looked at us. It's a small rejection that creates a
Yeah.
form of lies in our head, right? A form of a story in our minds. We get rejected by we even once we feel like we don't fit in somewhere when people we don't feel like people accept us or don't
Hmm.
see us, which I feel like we've been in a culture of feeling that way for a while of like there's just a lot of division, so we don't know where we land, where we're accepted. And for me, what I've realized is in those moments, it's like if we aren't prepared in the ways that rejection has hurt us, hindered us in the past, have brought us down, those lies come flooding in and we start believing them. So easy to believe. Like, I'm never going to find safe and secure love because I got broken up with again. You
Yeah.
know, I'm never going to find a group of people that truly accept me for who I am. No guy's ever going to think, this is from a woman's perspective, no guy's ever going to think I'm beautiful because I gained 10 pounds. And I realized that over the holiday season, I gained 10 pounds and now I hate the way I look and no guy's ever going to choose me. I'm not desirable. Like that's a self rejection we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these lies, I mean, the book is about all the different forms, but so many different forms of rejection that come to hit us. And I say this in the intro, it's like, hey, the reality is there's no magic cure, right? I mean, gosh, we all want the vaccine for COVID, and there's no vaccine, magic vaccine that will cure rejection and make it disappear
It's
forever.
true.
So if we can come to terms with that, we can live in such a way that we expect it, but we're stronger within it. And the only
Mm.
way we can be stronger is if we go through and heal from the past and recognize where the biggest ways in which we've been like hurt, knocked down, the biggest lies that come to try to attack us, so that in the future we can become more prepared. We have more tools on our tool belt. I think so often we kind of show up to our lives like, this is all I got. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, it's not all you got. You have the armor of God, right? You
That's
have God
good.
on your side. Like
Yeah.
but we need to choose that. God's not just like here, 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 here. Like we have to be active within that and we have to choose it. We have to choose to radically transform our minds. It doesn't just happen in a snap. We have to work at it. So how do we take what God has given us, what the amazing things that he provides for us, but then partner with him, partner with these amazing ways of transforming ourselves to be able to walk into the fullness of who he created us to be, to make it so that when rejection happens, we're hit and not taken down entirely. And so there's a freedom within that when we could say, hey, I work through my rejections. They're not for nothing. They don't mar my story. There is purpose within them. God will use them. And now I understand that like I have more say in this whole equation than I've ever realized. I can fight for myself. I
It's
can
good.
um I can have tools that will help me in fighting against my biggest tendencies when rejection does hit. And then when we come to self rejections, like I can heal from the ways I'm holding myself down, rejecting myself before other people have a chance. And man, like this is a daily practice, Chris. This is not like a one-time deal.
Well, let's get under the hood a little bit because I want to talk about how fear, guilt, and shame, I think those are the deadly trio we all face. Fear, guilt, and shame, then, Kate, play a role in keeping the rejection narrative alive. So, for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
guys I work with, the underlying self talk is, I just don't have what it takes. In fact, that's probably been one of the most dominant rejection based narratives I've faced myself. And it is so emasculating. Let me just tell you straight up, like,
Right.
I don't have what it takes. So when I've been rejected in relationships or because of a broken place in my own life, Kate, I unintentionally and unknowingly attract people who will
Mm-hmm.
reject me because that's the
Wow.
track record of my soul. The
Mm-hmm.
tape that plays is I just don't have what it takes. So I self-emasculate. How
Mm-hmm.
about for you and maybe other women you work with? I mean, let's pop the hood on this. Some of the
Yeah.
self-talk and some of those believed lies.
Man, and that's the thing is like we do women's biggest shame trigger is often body image. So I talk
Yes.
about that in the book, but men also struggle with body image. My goodness. And I don't think it's talked about quite enough. But that women's biggest shame trigger is something to do with our bodies. Men's
Mm-hmm.
biggest shame trigger is usually I am a failure and I feel like I'm never going to be enough. Like that kind of, so it's what you're talking about, And so which still is my trigger too. I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
And to your point, we often attract the things that we actually believe about ourselves. If I'm berating myself with, I'm not going to be beautiful, I don't feel beautiful, I don't like myself, I don't like these things about myself. We often sometimes attract people that are going to reinforce those same beliefs, and it
Yes.
almost feels normal to us. Our bodies don't like it, but it feels normal in a way because we already believe those as well. That feels normal. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found because of my wiring, because I believed some of those things for so long, when I'm with someone, either a friend or a significant other, that actually is genuinely affirming, like calm, collected, accepting me for who I am, my body is like, what is this?
Yes.
Like this doesn't feel normal. Like it's my wiring says that healthy acceptance of a person doesn't happen. Right. And so when it is happening, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know how to receive this. I almost want to run away from it because I'm so trained in being with people that don't accept those things about me and reinforce the negative things that I believe about myself. So I would say, I mean, gosh, any unhealthy belief system we have to bring to the light and take ownership for. I call it in the book, like be the referee of your own internal thought process. And I really believe it. Like nobody knows what's going on inside our heads except for ourselves. So, like, I'm the only one that can actually referee myself. Like, other people can't. If I'm thinking these thoughts, I'm the one that has to take ownership of controlling those thoughts and working on them in partnership, of course, with the Holy Spirit. But like,
So good.
I have to take that ownership. So if I'm believing a lie, let's say whatever the lie is, like that my body is not good enough, that I'm never going to be skinny enough or whatever enough, then I have to rewire that lie. What is it? Where did that lie come from? Why is it that a lie that I'm believing? Where did that story originate from that lie? Because there's always a story behind the lie that we're believing. It didn't just
That's
land
right.
there.
Right.
It was put on us somehow, some way that then got layered over time, reinforcing it, and then became a neural pathway in our brains, a neural pathway that
That's
says,
exactly right.
this is true about you, and the beauty about neuroplasticity that we've learned is that that neural pathway exists. It's really deep, but we can change it, rewire it. That's
That's
the
right.
beauty of how God rewires our brain, but we have to actively take part in that. So that's a neural pathway. Think of it as like a deep ditch in your brain that has happened probably from young years. And for me in the book, when we're talking about the body image thing, that came when I was like 10 years old, and an
Yes.
aunt of mine told me, um, why do you smile so fake? Why can't you
Wow.
smile normal? And I was like, what? And it was a year that I was going through as a woman, period, and all the womanly changes, and I
Mm-hmm.
was already feeling insecure about my body. I had gotten that at a very young age, and then reinforcing like, hey, your smile is fake, what's wrong with your face? I just started on a path of like, there's something wrong with the way I look, and there's something wrong with my body image. And so the neural pathway begins, right? And then I realized I look
Right.
different than everyone else because hit puberty earlier, and I started feeling awkward, and I didn't feel comfortable in my body. And there goes the neural pathway, continue, continue, continue. And anyway, so when we recognize that later in life, hey, I believe this lie that my body is not enough. What is underneath that? What story was created? Where did that first originate? Because that neural pathway started somewhere. Okay, now that we have recognized it, what do we want to believe instead? I want to believe that my body is a beautiful creation. I want to believe that I don't have to live up to any specific standard of body image because that's dictated by society and that's not dictated by God, right? I want to live up to God's standard of beauty. What does that look like? Okay, so now that I know that, how do I do that? What action steps do I take? This is a process. I mean, I'm going really practical for you, Chris, but like
So
this is
good.
where we have to be able and willing to go under the layers. Because if I just say I live with the lie that my body is not enough or no guy is going to find me desirable, like I can live in that lie for a long time, but at some point it just becomes me living in victim.
That's
And
it.
we have the power to change that. So for the men listening too, man, like I feel like what's so sad for me in the space of men and masculinity is like men also just need a vulnerable place to be able to share
It's good, Kate.
that, hey, I'm struggling with this fear, I'm struggling with this lie. I don't know where it's coming from, and I really want to get this out of like my belief system.
Mhm.
That is so hard, I find, for men to even be able to come to the plate to admit. So how can we create safe places for men to feel like they can share? You know, man, that is like my heart too for just men in our
So
culture
good.
today. Um, and I could go on a whole rant about that, but I won't right now.
No, I really like what you're saying, Kate, because guys, we've talked about this here on the show that when we believe a lie, we empower the lie to exist, but more specifically, as believers, followers of Jesus, when we empower the lie, we empower the liar himself.
There you go.
And it's such a big deal. Kate, I want to say though, before we move on to people listening, guys, not only do we have to eradicate the lie, but we have to replace the lie with truth. Remember in the
Yeah.
Gospels where Jesus talks about
Yes.
the house, you sweep the house clean and you
Hmm.
don't fill it up. Well, we've got to
Yeah.
fill it up with identity. We have to fill it up with truth. Guys, Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And I want to say to someone listening,
Mm.
joined with Kate and me here today, there's a specific and unique identity for which you've been created. And I just
Yeah.
want to say, it's time to break the lie and replace it with truth.
Yes. And you can do that. Like that
So
is
good.
my thing. It's like you can do it. You may have lived with that lie as your truth for so long, and you do not have to anymore.
That's right,
And
Kate.
it's hard and it can be intimidating, and I get it. Like those lies have felt true to your bones, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're wearing a backpack for so long and it's heavy, you almost don't feel it anymore until you finally take it off. And then you're like, "Wait, that feels so much lighter." And I get it. That's like with the lies. It's like they become a part of us and they're
Yeah.
piling on top of us, and it becomes normal. It's the same walking with a limp. You've walked with that limp for so long, you don't know what it looks like to just walk normally. And we forget that there's so much freedom
So
in being
good.
able that you don't have to walk that way. You don't have to carry that weight anymore. But today could be the day that you recognize, what is that lie? Where did it come from? Can I muster the courage to go through the layers and go through that starting point on where this originated for me in my childhood, over what somebody spoke to me, over how somebody treated me? Can I go there? Can I start healing through that? Right. And then can I work through what is it that I want to believe is my identity instead, once I've recognized where that lie has come
So
from?
good.
I mean, you can do that, y'all, no matter how painful your past is, no matter how old you are, and you feel like these lies are so deeply rooted, like this can never change for me. That's what's I hear from some people. I'm like, nope, it can change for you no matter what age you are, no matter like when you're realizing this, no matter how long it's become true and how much it feels true to you, there is a way out of this. And I say that as a person who has worked through it, who
Okay.
hated herself, who has had to work through replacing her identity through years. Okay. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to say
Mm-hmm.
it snaps a finger. Let's be realistic, but it's so possible, man.
I want to turn the page a little bit, Kate. I'd love to talk about sexual trauma and sexual shame. You
Mm,
talked about it in
yeah.
the book. I know that's associated with a lot of past relationships for people. I'd love to hear your experience and wisdom on navigating that.
Yeah. So I bring up sexual shame in the book because I feel like it deserved its own chapter. What I experienced talking with Christian singles and marrieds is that shame, especially sexual shame, and when it's related to our sexual desire and our sexuality, is one of the deepest areas that the enemy attacks us. So what I often find when we're talking about sexual shame is there's two ends of the spectrum, especially when we're talking about it, Chris, with Christian culture. And what I find is that there are people who have experienced some level of purity culture teachings, potentially, especially with the day and age we're in right now, especially with millennials. I'm speaking to a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel like they heard the teachings, they abstain from sex, but then there's a level of shame because they feel so disconnected from their body, so disconnected from what sexual desire means because they suppressed it for so long that when they do engage, when they do get married, they're like, I don't even know what's happening. I don't know what to do. This feels so foreign. And it creates a lot of problems in marriage. And there's like a shame there for feeling so inexperienced or feeling just so suppressed to that for so long. Then on the flip side, on the other end, you have people like me. So in my history had a lot to do with I knew all the purity culture teachings. I had them. I talk in the book about a situation where I had a boyfriend in high school and people found out that we were dating. They're like, you didn't tell the Bible leaders. And I was like, I didn't know I had to. Okay. And so
Wait,
like,
wait, 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 wait. I I gotta slow you down. You had to tell people when you were dating. I gotta know about that because
yeah,
we
let's
all
go.
grew up with cheesy youth group rules, but I gotta know about that one.
Yeah. So
What?
I thought, you tell your parents, you get permission from your parents. That's
That's
the
one
thing,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
Right. I had to get permission from my Bible leaders. Okay. Um, because the rule was if you're going to date in our group,
Okay.
it has to be with the desire to date for marriage in high school. And I'm like, okay, so we go to this meeting. I'll never forget. There's a piece of paper. Here's if you want to date, here's
Wow.
the rules. Here are the rules that we want you to adhere to, that we encourage. And it's like things like if you sit on the same couch, use two pillows between you at all times.
Leave room for
Two,
the Holy Spirit.
gotta leave that room. Make sure that your faces are no closer than 12 inches apart at any time. Never use a blanket. Only be in group settings. Only date in group settings. Like the whole thing. I mean, it was totally coming from, and Josh and the I Kiss dating
I
goodbye.
was just gonna go there. I was just gonna say, like, Kate, so it sounds like someone read a certain book about, I wasn't gonna say kissing it, but waving goodbye to dating. And
I Kiss
you know
dating
what's actually
goodbye.
a really good book, and I'm gonna let you finish. I have to interject. So it's Boundaries in Dating, Cloud and Townsend. Guys, if you're listening, that is a much healthier perspective because basically the premise of the book that we mentioned is that person A has a bad dating experience. Therefore, dating is bad.
Right.
That is
Right.
not it. So anyway, go ahead and continue with silly youth group rules
Right.
because
And
that's it.
so that is, yes. And like I at the time hadn't read the book, then I was like encouraged to read it, but like
Mhm.
it was all I didn't even fully, to be honest, I didn't even really need to read the book to know what was going on because I had all these rules in place. The rules were from that time and that book and
Yeah,
everything.
for sure.
We also were encouraged like you should go to premarital counseling, like meet with I was like,
What,
okay,
at 13?
16. Yeah. I mean, this is like so much pressure. Okay. Like
Well,
what is
well,
happening?
my
So
family give you 2 goats for your hand in marriage. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
it is. It's 100%. Felt so much pressure. Like, do I have to figure out if I'm going to marry this guy?
Hmm.
But then what happened, Chris, is we did engage in things sexually. We messed up. And
Okay.
because I felt so afraid, I honestly felt like there were so many rules and we were being so forced. It was so legalistic
Yeah.
that I felt fearful of sharing with anyone. Eventually, I remember we were at a Bible camp somewhere
Yeah.
and I remember sharing with one person and it didn't go well. Okay. It was like really harsh and I felt really shamed and I felt condescended. And I was like, well, I'm never going to share this again. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I just was like, I have to behavior modify, and that's all. But when you do something without a relationship with God, with understanding the why behind it and knowing out of deep reverence for the Lord and your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with God, why you're doing something, and also out of deep respect for yourself and your body and the sacred thing that God has created, it becomes legalism. And to be honest, it's very hard to follow the rules. Like when you don't understand and connect to the deep why in a way that's like rooted and grounded in you and who
Yeah.
you are and your relationship with God. So for me, I didn't understand the why. I thought behavior modification. Okay, so we tried, kept failing, kept trying, kept failing, more
Right.
shame, more shame, more shame, and led up to years later. I actually also had an experience I talk about in the book of just being raped, and it was the
Oh
worst,
my
I mean,
gosh.
the worst experience of my life. But what I also will say is because I was so trained to think it's my fault, I'm doing this, it's my fault, I'm responsible in that
Mm.
situation because I knew this person, I blamed myself and I was like, it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
This happened because of me. And I pushed that down. I didn't tell anybody that had
Mm.
happened. And I never classified it as rape until years later, years and years and years later,
Okay.
because I blamed myself. And so shame is a soul eating emotion. And sexual shame, it takes us away from connecting to God. It takes us away from experiencing God's love for us,
Mm-hmm.
understanding and knowing our true identity. It's like a block and a barrier. And the enemy uses that to just keep us twisted, keep us locked down and keep us in more shame. And then actually what happens in more shame is you end up continuing to sin and then feeling more shame about it. Like
Exactly.
it's just this terrible self-fulfilling prophecy. And so no matter whoever's listening right now, what happened to me and what I like want to share is like I realized I had gotten raped. I realized I had been living under so much sexual shame from my past. I realized I had to rewrite my sexual identity and how I saw myself in my sexuality, and
Wow.
um, that's taken years. So I'm going to go out and say like that's been a process, and I believe that that's probably one of the biggest things, whether you're a woman struggling with your sexual past, a man struggling with your sexual past, or you're somebody who's struggling with porn right now. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing. We don't create spaces where we can share honestly, vulnerably, and have that received. And we instead live in hiding, and the shame eats
That's
away at
it.
us.
That's it.
And it will eat at us for years until we bring it to the light.
The fingerprints of the enemy
Mm,
are secrecy and shame.
yeah.
Secrecy and shame, and um, Kate, for the people you work with and the people I've worked with, I've found that when helping people through sexual addiction, such as pornography,
Yeah.
especially pornography, the issue is rarely sexual. It's
Mm-hmm.
abandonment, it's rejection. In fact, I think Brene Brown said it this way in Daring Greatly. She said, "For $5 in 5 minutes, I don't have to be rejected."
Mm,
And what
mm,
happens is we end up nurturing the broken place, nurturing the broken spirit, and we develop it saying, "This is who I really am." Yet the
mm.
Father is before us, and he says, like David, "The sacrifice acceptable to me
Yeah.
is a
Wow.
broken and contrite heart. Give me your rejection," says the Lord. "Give me your
Mm,
broken place, and let me shape the very thing you've been nurturing and bring about good from the very thing
mm,
that was meant to destroy you."
yeah. Wow. Powerful.
So I want to attempt to land the plane in some way,
Yeah.
because this has been such a fun conversation. When you canvas your life
Mm,
up until this point, finish this sentence. I wish more people blank.
would see themselves the way God sees them.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's good, Kate.
I, mm-hmm. I'm just gonna leave it there.
No, that's good.
That's it.
What
Mm.
freaks you out about relationships still?
That hmm, it's still the same lie.
Mm.
If I'm being really honest with you, the same thing that
Mm-hmm.
I'm working through is the lie that came up for me in my most recent breakup, which is that they like what they see at first, but I won't, the full me will not be accepted by a person.
Wow.
And so how I fight that is saying, do I accept the full me? And
So good.
that's where I'm at. You know, when that lie pops in, I come back to, what does God say about me? And do I accept all of that truly? It's easy to say God believes these things about me. It's harder to take that and say, well, I believe those things about me too. So
Wow.
when that's probably the biggest fear in relationships is, will I not be accepted for all of me? And then if I'm not, what do I think of me? So it's kind of re-engineering that and working through that.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Kate, anything else you want to share today? This has been
This
such a
has
fun
been
conversation, and your brand new book is available right now. We'll have a link to purchase in the show notes over at wintoday.tv/episode 230.
Yes.
Kate, you're a gem. Anything
You
else?
are incredible. No, Chris, this has been wonderful. Thank you. I love how you go under the layers and you have a gift of like,
Thank you.
Mike Foster, a friend of mine,
Yeah.
talks about how we like talk so surface level, just like up here,
Yeah.
on the skin. And we have so many conversations like that. Like, what does it look like to go under those layers and to ask
That's it.
questions to go deeper? And we're so living in just the surface level lives of our lives. And so thank you for not doing that. Thank you for pushing me and asking me questions that made me think a lot even. And so you definitely had that gift. And I think it's needed today where we're just so used to like hey, how are you? Good. How are you? Good.
Yeah.
No, let's go under that, like, but how are you really?
Yeah.
What's going on under that? What was the deeper motivation for you writing this book? So
That's it.
thank you for that today.
Hey, you're welcome. Well, I want everyone to connect with you. You're on Instagram. That's where we met initially. How
Yes.
can everyone connect?
Yeah. Love Instagram. Come over, y'all. Kaitness, Kaitness on
So good.
the gram. And then Heart of Dating. Love all the guys and all the girls there on both accounts, heartofdating.com. Our podcast, Heart of Dating, is anywhere you can find a podcast. We have lots of things going on, so come join us. I hope you enjoy the book. Man, it's so fun. But Chris, thank you so much for today. This is a joy.
Super proud. Thanks again.